Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Rob Emrich. He is the CEO at Gimbal. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
I'm excited to chat with you today, Rob. We're going to be talking about marketing and advertising's role in a mobile-first world today. But before we dive into that, I'd love for our listeners to just have a little bit of context as to why you're the guy to be talking about this. So can you tell the folks listening just a little bit about Gimbal and what you guys are up to over there?
Sure. So Gimbal is really the combination of a company that I founded in 2011 that was called the Mobile Majority. That was a full stack media and ad tech platform really based around solving mobile advertising. Gimbal was a separate company that was incubated within Qualcomm. It was originally called Qualcomm Retail Solutions and then spun out of Qualcomm in 2014, and we acquired it in late 2016. So it's really a merger of those two companies. I think historically, when people thought about Gimbal, they thought about beacons because Qualcomm was the originator of Bluetooth Low Energy beacons, which is a part of the history of our organization and our company. But really, the way we think about beacons and is how they relate to phones and how the interplay of those two generate relevant data from a marketing and advertising perspective. So that's the quick history of our company and how I'm here today.
I love it. So Rob, we're going to be, obviously talking about, mobile first, what's marketing's role in that. And as we were talking about this offline, the first thing that came to mind for you said something about the phone bridging offline and online worlds. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. So before this company, I've had, I guess this is my sixth company, and two of them before this were in the e-commerce space. One was a marketplace company. So I got from that experience, I started to understand marketing and advertising as a buyer of marketing and advertising. And I really began to think about the online and digital ecosystem. And I think one of the more interesting things about sort of the rise of Google, the rise of Amazon, Google being a marketing and advertising company, at least that's where all their revenue comes from now, and Amazon being an e-commerce company, these are two of the largest companies in the world at this point. I think that what's interesting to think about is, why did they grow? One reason that they grew was because our, human behavior went into a new world, into the digital world. That's certainly one reason I think that you can attribute to their growth. The other is that with digital marketing, the reason that Google is successful and the way that Amazon grew, you can have very defined ROI. And that's something that I learned as an e-commerce CEO, and again, primarily as a buyer of marketing, is that in the online and digital space, we use cookies, we use pixels that end up being digital artifacts to really understand behavior online. And to the extent that a marketer understands those sort of those guideposts and milestones in what a person is doing online, they can build programs, whether they're around search or display or whatever it might be, that show a definitive ROI for different digital marketing channels. And so when marketers can really close that loop between targeting and attribution to understand which channels are performing, they can accelerate growth much faster than perhaps an offline company. So the way that I think about what we do as a firm now at a very high level is that we are defining what those digital artifacts are for the real world. And when you think about the real world, the physical world, I think about nouns. I think about people and places and things. And so we think about people as being defined by their phone for reasons that I think are probably obvious to all of your listeners already. You always have your phone with you, or almost always have your phone with you. It's acting as an incredibly robust sensor for what's happening around you. We think about places in terms of the actual geographic boundaries of those places. So using our beacons and or GPS and or Wi-Fi to create geofences. And then we think about things as really IoT. So we happen to be there's 3 protocols for Bluetooth low energy transmission. One was developed by Qualcomm and is now Gimbal. It was the first. And then came iBeacon, which is Apple. And after that was Eddystone. So we're very lucky in the sense that we are part of sort of the OS level, at least in the Bluetooth low energy space. And that helps us define, things, because really anything with a chip and a source of power has the ability to broadcast our Bluetooth low energy signal, and is something that we can use to understand how people through their phones interact with things. So those are sort of the digital artifacts that we look at. We really help marketers and advertisers define those milestones, those guideposts in the real world. And so I think about our beacons very similarly to the way I thought about conversion pixels in e-commerce, and probably the way that a lot of your listeners think about their digital marketing efforts. And so I think what's exciting about, understanding how to bridge these two worlds is great marketers, the most clever marketers, are able to find signals of intent, that is targeting, from non-obvious sources. And so I view our platform as a way for clever marketers to have an advantage over other marketers. We can't guarantee that their assumptions will be correct about, what will drive results or what might not drive results, in the same way that Google can't guarantee which keywords will perform. But if we give you full transparency to determine, what your ROI is, it really changes the game in terms of being able to identify a new category of, as I said, those milestones from the physical world and use those for targeting and for attribution. So I hope that wasn't.
Do you have is there a particular use case that you could walk us through to give us an idea, maybe with one of your current customers, or a story that you could share that kind of maps back to that?
Sure. So, we have some huge customers now, which is, we're again very fortunate that some of our early customers took the leap. Customers like Citibank in the financial sector, which we're growing in pretty dramatically, shopper marketing firms. Many of our current customers are more on the B2C side, and I know that your audience is more B2B. And I think that marketing on a B2B level, it takes even more creativity sometimes. But to give you an existing use case on the B2C side, this is not a customer, but I think it will help drive the point home. If we talk about, how would you market pizza bites in a way that is that you can define how successful a campaign is in the same way that you could define how successful a search campaign is. So if you're an attorney and you have figured out that mesothelioma is a very high value keyword of 5,000, you're willing to pay $500 or $5,000 for a click because it's worth so much more to you. What we would do for a company like Pizza Bites is to say, why don't we begin to have a very robust system using if-then terms or if-then statements that allow you to create essentially targeting statements and measurement statements. So, for instance, if Pizza Bites wanted to get, let's say, a higher income demographic, they may give our platform instructions that says, target people who live within the following zip code that skews above average income. Then, once you know those devices, sort of mapping again the physical world to the digital world, once you've identified those devices, show them a video ad for Pizza Bites. Because we now know the device ID, we know where that person lives. The last part is to say, did that person go into a grocery store? We can know that by the geofence. And then we can say, did that person actually dwell in front of the Pizza Bites section in the refrigerated aisle or in the freezer aisle because we have a beacon that gives us hyper precise location there. And we can say they were there for 4 minutes. So we know that our video was able to at least make a consumer take a look, and that it cost around $1.25 to get somebody to really take a look at buying pizza bites. Now, if we work with some of our other partners, we could say, based on SKU level sales, were we able to move the needle from an actual sales perspective, not just to get consideration? What's exciting for me is that those are all use cases that are developed by our customers because they're more clever, because they can figure out an angle that another marketer may not have already figured out, and can continue to sort of push the limit by using these offline data sources for the purposes of digital marketing, but offline sales. And that's the bridge that I was talking about. So I think where I'm excited about the future of our company is that as big as Amazon is, as big as Google is, as big as the digital world has gotten, this year it still only accounts for around 8% of all commerce. It's not likely in our lifetimes that online commerce will eclipse offline commerce completely. I think that there's more of a blending of those two. That's maybe a different podcast, but that's what we do. That's what I mean by sort of bridging the gap between the online and offline world.
Okay, so as we were talking offline, Rob, obviously that everyone listening to this is in a B2B context, and you had me give you a couple different websites, some of our customers that are B2B. And as we were talking through them, we decided we were just going to kind of do a live, so to speak. This isn't live, but we're going to talk through, two different Sweetfish customers, Helix Education and Seismic Software, to just get your thoughts, from a targeting perspective, not so much attribution. You touched on targeting and attribution there with the Pizza Bite story, and I think that's super valuable. But from a targeting perspective, when you look at Helix Education, as I'm looking at their website right now, it's higher education deserves a better enrollment growth partner. So their buyer is in the higher ed space. They're at a university, and they're trying to get students to stay longer and to attract new students to their university. How would you think about targeting for a B2B company like that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So let me just make sure I understand a little bit more about what Helix does first. So it sounds, and I always like to start with the goal, right? What exactly is that customer trying to accomplish? How do they generate positive ROI? And so it sounds like they have a product that helps individual or specific universities drive enrollment. So it's sort of a train the trainer or help the helper type of a model. But nonetheless, the way that I would think about it is to really go to what the goals are for that university. And so for Helix to begin to think about what are people doing in the real world that are very strong signals that they may be good candidates, likely to be interested in the universities that Helix is running programs for, right? So in the same way where if you think about what happened with Google and why did Google grow so quickly, and perhaps why do marketers want to buy advertising during March Madness based on demographics, what are the things that we know about the customers, the end users, these potential students from these universities that will generate a very high ROI? So for instance, if let's say one of their partner schools was a technical college that taught people how to do, auto tech.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know what their specific universities do is, what they, might do. But if they find a strong signal that is finding people, I'm just, again, riffing on this university theme, finding people who are frequently spend at least 5 minutes once every other week at an AutoZone or name 5 other auto retailers, those people have a much higher chance of being interested in becoming a car tech. You could go a step further and say, now limit that universe to just people who are living in places that have that are likely to be for people who skew younger, that perhaps also add as a targeting parameter, then spent time going to the library. So the way that I think about our platform and how mobile can be effective is there are so many more options to target a person, and for a clever marketer to find something that's not obvious, like that idea of, we found that people are spending X amount of time at the library are 10 times more likely to want to enroll in this auto training university. That becomes a very valuable test that they've done. And we can show them through attribution and device IDs, which of these students converted. Perhaps we're doing our attribution on a CRM basis where we align names back to a device ID. So those are some of they take some time to get set up, but once you've made that investment, you can really drill down on marketing to understand what's working and what's not. So I think that would probably be a good idea for one of their, or a good example, I should say, for one of their end users on how they might get value or how we might help Helix provide value to their partners.
That makes perfect sense, Rob. I love, just seems like the world of opportunity that opens up to you when you start thinking about the offline, things you can do offline with geofence technology and different things like that, instead of limiting yourself to only tracking digital behavior, but looking at the offline component. Just it could almost be overwhelming to think about how many possibilities there are. And so I love, but the creative marketer is already thinking that way. I love that example. Rob, this has been really, really helpful. If there's somebody listening to this, they want to stay connected with you or they want to learn more about Gimbal, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Yeah, I think hitting up our website, gimbal.com, Gimbal.com, is probably the easiest way. There's a contact us button. You can hit me up on LinkedIn or on our website or on Twitter or whatever it might be. I'm, very interested always in sort of brainstorming with potential customers and others about how we can use a lot of these sort of new, again, digital milestones along the way to help improve outcomes and make marketing and advertising far more efficient.
Wonderful, Rob. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate it.
All right. I appreciate you taking the time and look forward to being of help to your listeners.
There are lots of ways to build a community, and we've chosen to build the B2B growth community through this podcast. But because of the way podcasts work, it's really hard to engage with our listeners. And without engagement, it's tough to build a great community. So here's what we've decided to do. We're organizing small dinners across the country with our listeners and guests. No sales pitches, no agenda, just great conversations with like-minded people. We'll talk business, we'll talk family, we'll talk goals and dreams. We'll build friendships. So if you'd like to be a part of a B2B growth dinner in a city near you, go to b2bgrowthdinners.com. That's b2bgrowthdinners.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.